The reality of it is Donald Trump wants to take the DOJ, the FBI, the military, and make them all a part of his own personal little cadre of police and enforcers. That's it. And I just wish people would get off their behinds and understand exactly what's at stake. Because, Sarah, the reality of it is that Donald Trump, at the end of the day, will do this and continue to do this until he's stopped. He's always operated that way. And it kills me why no one's figured that stuff out. Not Democrats, not Republicans, not the media. No one has figured out that he will continue to exact the price on this democracy until someone stops him. So here's the question, not who will stop him, because I think at this point we're kind of past that. But on the other side of this fall, as we move into the fall, we get set up for the November elections next year. Do you think the American people will stop him? Do you think there is outside these walls and the walls of a lot of people with big titles and fancy cars that the American people themselves will say, you know what, we've just had enough of this BS. It is time to get our house in order, to focus on our families, our jobs, and our communities, and move the country forward as opposed to wallowing in the funk of Donald Trump's brain?
I think there are a lot of Americans across the country who are upset with this administration because they've seen him break campaign promise after campaign promise. He said he would lower grocery prices. He said he would protect Medicaid. Yep. He said he would release the Epstein files. He said he would end the war in Ukraine on day one. I could keep going. And you see that the Republicans, specifically Donald Trump, are already trying to cheat in the 2026 elections with what they're doing in Texas.
That's it.
Exactly, right, because you shouldn't have to redraw the maps if you knew that you were going to do well in the midterms. And so it shows me that they know that they're worried about heading into the midterms because Americans are not happy with what they've seen from this administration, majority of the policies, I would say. I think there are some things that some voters are happy with that he's done, maybe in terms of immigration, for example. They think, okay, well, that's why I voted for him. But I think that some of those voters also think that he's gone a step too far when it comes to something like immigration. And so I think that you're going to see in the midterms these voters come out and push back because they're not seeing from the elite across this country people pushing back. I think Kamala Harris put it really well when she was interviewed on Stephen Colbert's show a few weeks back, where she said, none of this has surprised me. I guessed all this would happen, but it's the capitulation that's been surprising because we've seen corporation, tech moguls, universities, law firms, they've all caved to him. And so to your point that he is going to just try to see how much he can get away with until he stopped. And so it's going to take we, the people, the voters, to stop him. And
are they ready to, are we, the people, ready to show up?
That's the question, right? Because the other thing is, someone has to convince we, the people, that things need to change. Right. Because they can feel it themselves, but at the same time, you have to get people to go out and vote. When you think of the midterms, the kind of folks that get out, they're already kind of rabid and excited. You need the other folks who aren't rabid and excited. But I want to also get back, Brendan, back to the kind of selective justice that Trump has. This is from the New York Times. The headlines, Trump's selective stance on justice, redemption for some, scorn for others. Mr. Trump himself, a felon, they like to point that out, has shown particular leniency to criminals he seems to identify with, people who are white or wealthy or who he believes have been unfairly persecuted or who rioted in his name on January 6th. Also in the article, this quote from him, they will never be an asset to society, he said. I don't care. I know we all want to say, oh, they're going to be rehabbed. They're not going to be rehabbed. That was when he was holding up 5 mugshots of all people of color. What's the difference there? What do you read from that?
This is a president who got his political start by trying to undermine the legitimacy of the first black president. The racism of this man and this candidate is baked into everything that he does. One of the things that's saddest for me, hearing that quote and comparing it to what happened on January 6th and the subsequent pardons, is with January 6th, you had an overwhelmingly white riot against a perhaps majority or near majority minority police force. I talked to a lot of officers, and one of them said something that has stuck with me for several years now. He said, look, I have worked a lot of riots in my career, but this is the first riot that I worked where the rioters thought that they were right. They thought that they were the ones that were in charge. And what scares me is when you see the president using such racist or racialized language like this, it risks legitimizing what those rioters believed and proves them correct.
Well, since you put the race thing on the
And
table,
I just want to say, there's a lot of melding around the table.
I just drop it back here, and anybody can play with it if they want to. But that kind of brings me to D.C. And what we've seen playing out here in Chocolate City, with actually a little bit more mocha these days.
Nowadays, yeah.
But that element, to your point, is always been an essential thread that's woven throughout a lot of the things that Donald Trump has said and done. And I'm curious as we, I talked about the upcoming elections, and we talked about how the Justice Department and all that responds to it. I don't know, Laura, if the country is looking at it through that prism as well, when, because they like to fixate on the fact that, Hispanic men have moved towards Donald Trump. Black men have moved towards Donald Trump. And I'm like, okay, that's the excited utterances of elections and the failure of Democrats to actually get off the dime and do the job. All right. But what is that? Does it say more about that moment, or does it also say that Trump can still get away, going back to my point, get away with dumping on a community like Washington, D.C., largely African-American, Hispanic community? When you go to, up to Morgan, the Petworth area and places like that. What does that say to the voters when they look at that piece of it? Does that resonate, do you think, with them from your reporting and coverage of these stories?
I think that potentially it could. I think we're seeing that President Trump's numbers on things like immigration, which he's often used to demonize Latinos across the country, that he's not necessarily doing as well as he was previously on that issue with voters. But you also see that right now in Washington, D.C., the president and the administration and the White House are trying to dominate the narrative. And you're not seeing much pushback against the administration from other figures across the country, Democratic figures, when it comes to how they are framing this. And just today, the White House was out saying that, trying to spin the numbers, essentially saying that 48% of non-immigration arrests made in D.C. since they started this operation are in the crime-ridden areas of D.C., in Ward 7 and 8. But when you actually put that another way, that's less than half of the arrests, meaning the majority of the arrests are actually not in crime-ridden areas.